Poco released the F7 Pro and F7 Ultra earlier this year, and now we've got the Poco F7.
Hey guys, Alex Mace here. We all know that Poco produces excellent phones, and of course Poco is owned by Xiaomi. However, with the Poco F7, they definitely went up a notch.
Starting off with the build, it's very premium. It's got an aluminium frame and glass on the back, and most phones in this price range are plastic through and through. However, that makes for a little bit heavier weight of 217 grams, and this one is also IP68 rated for water and dust resistance, which is excellent. The starting price point of this one is only 389 quid here in the UK, which makes all of this an even more impressive package.
The Poco F7 has a superb 120Hz Super AMOLED screen.
This is a flagship grade screen. It's 120Hz, 68 billion colors, AMOLED, and it gets pretty bright. Also on top of it, we got HDR10 Plus, supports Dolby Vision, 1.5K resolution, and very sharp at 447 pixels per inch. You get pretty good brightness in both manual and auto mode. The phone is pretty legible and very usable outdoors. I couldn't test it in a proper sunny day, but still I think it's going to be absolutely fine. Refresh rate goes up to 120 Hz, and you can put it in default mode, or if you want to, you can customize it between 60 and 120 Hz. In any case, if you put it in 120 Hz mode, when you're not interacting with the screen, it's going to go down to 60 Hz to preserve battery. Amazon Prime recognizes it as Dolby Vision compliant in addition to HDR10 Plus. YouTube also recognizes the F7 as HDR compliant and can play HDR video in relevant content. The colors are punchy and accurate, and also being an AMOLED screen, you get deep blacks instead of dark grays, which is great. And content, no matter what you watch on it, you will be absolutely satisfied with it. It really is a flagship level screen.
Really, the only thing missing from this gorgeous display is an LTPO technology and a variable refresh rate, but then again, it was never expected at this price point.
Now moving on to the software.
The Poco F7 runs on HyperOS by Xiaomi on top of Android 15.
I'm not a fan of HyperOS, but here we do get 4 years of software updates and 6 years of security patches, which is pretty good for this mid-range segment. As expected on a HyperOS phone, you do get a lot of bloatware and a lot of pre-installed apps. The good news is you can uninstall pretty much all of them. It just takes a little bit of time. HyperOS is a heavily modified software skin, and the other thing I don't like about it is you cannot close the apps by swiping it upwards. You have to swipe it sideways to the left or to the right, which is ridiculous. The Poco F7 does have an optical fingerprint scanner, and it works pretty swiftly. We also get an always-on display here. Just bear in mind, if you turn it on, it's going to consume more battery. You do get NFC, Bluetooth 5.4 and Wi-Fi 7. However, one thing you don't get here is eSIM support. There is a dual SIM card slot and no slot for a microSD expandable memory. The Poco F7 has Ultra HDR in the Google Photo app. In terms of AI shenanigans, there is Gemini support on board, which is great, and also Xiaomi have implemented their own AI engine here to be used if you need it.
Some of you might have noticed that there is no air blaster on the top of the frame, only one mic. That is not because there is no air blaster on board, it's actually Xiaomi, or technically Poco team, moved it to here, those green lines.
Interesting spot for an IR blaster, but it is creative, so let's go with it. You can open the mirror mode into the settings, and then you're gonna add the device you want to use your phone as a remote control for. Then if you cannot find it, you can type it in, and once that happens, you need to raise the phone and point the back of the camera where it is towards the device. Now moving on to the performance section.
And we do get the rare combo of not only having a new phone just recently released, but also gets a recently released brand new chipset. In this case, it is the Qualcomm's 8S Gen 4, the first time I'm testing it.
Qualcomm's 8S Gen 4 with Adreno 825, and you do get generous 12 GB of RAM on the Poco F7 with 256 GB of storage or 512 GB of storage. You can also virtually expand the memory by up to 12 GB from the storage. You can also change the performance mode from the battery app settings. The 8S Gen 4 proves itself to be almost as powerful as last year's flagship 8 Gen 3. When you turn on the ultimate mode, the turbo mode, the results get a little bit better. Just a quick clarification, the CPU mode can be changed between balance and ultimate mode, while the GPU always works in ultimate mode. The Geekbench scores for both CPU and GPU are pretty strong for this mid-range class. Same goes for the Antutu score, where I almost got 1,900,000 points. However, one area that the phone did not fare so great was the 3D mark. From the basic tests, I got 2 scores and 2 maxed out because the chipset is too powerful. However, when I wanted to put it to a 20-minute stress test, the phone just overheated and could not finish it off. As a matter of fact, it overheated after 12-13 minutes out of that 20-minute test. Here I'm just reporting on the unit that I've got. I'm not talking about the Poco F7 units in general. It might be something wrong with the phone that I've got at hand. So the unit I've got, I cannot put it through heavy multitasking or heavy gaming. What about some casual gaming with my favorite Asphalt Legends? I put it on a 45-minute session and it handled it pretty well. It got a little bit warm, which was expected like on other phones, and the game frame rate did not go past 60 Hz as expected as well. However, the GPU handled it quite well. Right, before we finish it off with the cameras, let's talk about the battery.
The global version of the F7, which is in my hand, gets a humongous 6,500 mAh battery, but in India they do get an even bigger 7,550 mAh battery.
The Indian market not only gets a bigger battery but also charger in the box. The rest of the world will be market dependent for the charger. In the battery app you can see the health of your battery and also the number of cycle counts you charge your phone. The phone I've got here is intended for the UK and European market and it doesn't get a charger, so I tried my Anker 100 watt charger. The Poco F7 super fast charges up to 90 watts according to Poco. Charging the phone from a completely empty tank with my faithful brick, in half an hour I got 49%. A full charge took 1 hour and 20 minutes. For such a huge battery, it is not that slow, to be honest. A couple of days later, I got my hands on an original Xiaomi 120 watt charger, so I decided to do a quick test with it. Let's compare the results. Again, charging it from completely 0%, I got a pretty good 65% charge in only half an hour. That was impressive. A full charge took just under 53 minutes, which was another impressive result. So the battery is big and it charges well. How about the battery life? 1 hour of phone calls took the battery down by 2%, 1 hour of web browsing took the battery down by 4%, and 1 hour of watching videos took the battery down by 7%. Pretty good results overall. Now let's wrap it up with the cameras.
Well, after getting so much for your money with these killer specs at such a low price, well, Poco had to make some cuts somewhere to keep the profit margins going, and then decided to do it into the camera department.
On the back we've got a dual camera setup, 50 megapixel main snapper, but no optical image stabilization, does 4K video though, and an ultra wide 8 megapixel sensor with fixed focus and does only Full HD 30 frames per second. On the front we got a 20 megapixel selfie with fixed focus and only Full HD 60 frames per second video. Daytime selfies on this phone are exactly what you would expect from a phone in this price range. The colors are good, the high dynamic range is okay, however there's a lack of detail in the subject. The separation of the subject in portrait mode is good though. Daytime shots from the Poco F7 are overall good. Detail is at a good level and the dynamic range is okay without being exceptional or anything, and colors are punchy. It produces likable shots, and even though they're not flagship great, they're still pretty good for this mid-range class. The ultra-wide shots from that much maligned 8 megapixel ancient sensor are not great as expected really. The high dynamic range and the contrast obviously are below par, but at least the colors are okay. The 2x digital zoom shots are also okay, surprisingly good. I expected worse quality than this, but still they're quite usable during the day. The night selfies are surprisingly good. They're quite usable when there is enough lighting. There is more detail here in those night selfies than there is in the daytime selfies, which is a paradox. The colors are good, the exposure is decent, and the contrast is also good. So in any case, these selfies are better than expected. At night time, the ultra-wide camera as expected struggles big time. Light sources are blown out and there is not much detail in them. In very well lit areas, however, it probably can give you some usable shots here and there. Just not great. The shots from the main camera are not that bad actually. Understandably, there is some noise and also lack of detail in the shadows, and the high dynamic range isn't great, but it can still give you very usable photos. The 2x zoom shots at night are just like during the day, they are better than expected. The detail is not half bad and also they're not over processed. Again, quite usable shots for sure. The video stability of the ultra-wide camera is better than I expected. However, it has fixed focus issues. The stability of the main camera is pretty good and the detail is okay. However, what the quality of these cameras is, well, you're going to be the judge of that. Let's go. Video, of course, is limited to 1080p 60 frames per second. Ultra wide at 1080p 30 frames per second. Main camera 4K at 60 frames per second. And of course, let's do the 2x digital zoom again, 4K at 60 frames per second. I have problems with the focusing. This is selfie video at 1080p 60 frames per second. Ultra wide at 1080p 30 frames per second. Main camera 4K at 30 frames per second. Show the 2x zoom on the main camera.
Well, there you have it, folks. The Poco F7, absolute killer of a phone. It's got a couple of issues, but forgivable issues, of course, given the price. And it gives you a lot for that price anyway. Could this be your next phone? Well, it's up to you at the end of the day. Thanks very much for watching and see you next time. Ciao.